For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections.
If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious.
Violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses, and burning down buildings. They are coming after me because I am fighting for you. That's what's happening.
Greetings, fellow thought criminals, and thank you for joining the insurrection. I'm Michael Lauer, and today I'm joined by Kelly Walker from Freedom Talk Magazine. How you doing this morning, Kelly?
Hey, I'm doing well. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And before we jump into some of our main stories, which is, I guess, New York's gone full communist. And obviously everybody saw that Antifa finally got sentenced for something to some real time yesterday, and they are freaking out. I do want to mention one other item because we didn't get to it yesterday. We had some tech issues at the end, and I just got distracted when our guest fell off. And guys, this time it was not a conspiracy. It was nothing weird going on. His home internet just started glitching out at the end. But luckily we got through the whole story this time. And again, if you didn't see it, go back, check out this episode, because I think it's very clear this Navy SEAL was murdered. It was not a suicide. At the very least, it deserves a second look, if for no other reason than so his family can get some closure and clear his name. And honestly, to get access to the retirement and life insurance funds that he was denied since it was ruled a suicide. But Annie's Architecture of Jihad, the audio book, finally came out yesterday. Now, long story short, Amazon's made a bunch of policy changes now, and she had actually had this done like well over a month ago, but because part of it was done with AI, they wouldn't take or an AI reader, they wouldn't take it. Now you have to use their system if you're going to do an audiobook where any part of it's narrated with an AI reader. And they also are now taking, over 2/3 of the revenue from anybody that loads to Audible or whatever else. So there are 5 services listed there where you can get it, and you can get it on Apple and other mainline ebook sites or audiobook sites. But yeah, unfortunately, Amazon's doesn't really play fair since they have the market cornered. But pick this up, especially if you're somebody that doesn't have time to sit down and read a book in the traditional sense. This is an excellent book. It's a tool. You want to educate yourself on what's really going on and understand the Islamification of Europe and America. This is the way to do it. This breaks down what jihad really means, that it isn't just somebody strapping explosives to themselves and detonating a bus full of nuns, that it is much more complicated. And again, this with citation going back to the Quran, to the Hadith, using their words, you better understand the reality of what's going on before our media can whitewash it and try to downplay the reality of the situation. Yep, New York.
I want to say real quick, I have the book, and Annie's written several articles for Freedom Talk Magazine. We've advertised the book in Freedom Talk Magazine. If you go to realfreedomtalk.com and look at the past several issues, you'll see some of her work. And I can't recommend this book highly enough because Annie actually lived in that environment and she speaks of something she knows.
Oh, absolutely. And, part of her knowledge on this, her mother was a Quran teacher, her father was a sheikh. So she grew up under this indoctrination. She understands it inside and out. And part of what, led, she was questioning things even very young. And that's part of what led to her whole situation, being sold into slavery and then being forced to escape the country. But yeah, if you really want to understand what's going on, this is an excellent tool. It breaks it down in a way that's easy to understand, bite-sized pieces, and it gives you more and more information the further you get into the book. And again, I think that's something that's really hard to do. And it's hard to get people to understand something that's this complex, but this is a great way to do it. Buy 2 copies, one for yourself, buy a loaner that you can hand out to some friends, help educate some more people, because that loaner book probably ain't coming back. But yeah, to jump into this... weak and pathetic Mamdani-backed radicals sweep Democratic establishment in New York's electoral bloodbath. Dan Goldman, Democrat in New York, he lost his seat to someone even more radical. But this just shows this leftward shift in New York. Breaking: Mamdani-backed socialists Claire Valdez and Daria Liza Avila Chevalier win New York Democrat House primaries. And I've read a few articles, and honestly, I have not gotten into depth with this Daria Liza person, but there's a lot of people that think that she's like a much bigger threat than AOC. Essentially, she has the same insane viewpoints, but she's, I guess, better organized, more methodical. And as far as like getting some of these policies across the finish line, they say she's somebody that has more of an ability to do that than somebody like AOC that's basically just, food for the cameras and a mouthpiece for this nonsense, but not really able to execute.
Yeah, Vladimir Lenin said that the goal of socialism is communism. So it's very deceptive for these people to portray themselves as socialists or democratic socialists. On, that's a whitewash, because their goal is communism. Socialism is just a sort of an anemic form, or maybe a younger version, but it's eventually going to grow up into full-fledged communism, and you don't want that. Just ask anybody who, like Seek Smith, her father fled from Cambodia with her family to escape Pol Pot's killing fields. And I've spoken to people who've come out of other communist regimes. Ask a lot of Cuban Americans and others who've experienced communism in Latin America. So this is a very, very dangerous situation, mainly ideologically. And what they'll do is they'll introduce it in a milder form, and that's kind of the gateway drug. And then they've got you hook, line, and sinker.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. It's easy to tempt people with the idea of free stuff. It's hard to run against Santa Claus. But it is a trap. And as we're seeing in New York and other areas that have embraced this stuff, they're now financially bankrupt, and that just continues to get worse. None of the promises that Mamdani's made are really working out. You still don't have your free buses. The free grocery stores aren't really going to happen, even though they're spending, I think it was right around $60 million on them. But the little test runs they've done so far, where the shelves were bare within hours. It's just not going to work like that. And again, it's going to close all the actual businesses in the area that have been providing food to the community for time immemorial. But you can't compete against Santa Claus. So when you bring this kind of stuff in, it's only going to get worse. It isn't free. Your tax dollars are paying for it. They're going to continue to raise taxes. Wealthy business owners, other people that have some skin in the game, they're going to continue to leave, and the situation is going to continue to collapse. But for some reason, people get dazzled by this. I think a lot of this has to do with our education system and the lack of education that people get in our government schools, where they're just being indoctrinated. But this philosophy, unfortunately, is growing on the left. And I think, unfortunately, there's a real possibility we have more people start embracing it, especially if we appear to be headed towards problems due to AI and a number of other things economically further down the line. And honestly, when I say further down the line, I'm not sure how much further. We've got the guy that owns Anthropic. I have a mental block on his name, but he's been out there at this interview I've talked about a few times now. That was filmed maybe about a month ago. That he's expecting 20% unemployment by the end of the year. We just had them pull the latest versions of several different AIs from the public because, and part of the reason is because they think this is going to evaporate a lot more white collar jobs now that they're able to perform a lot of functions that they've been kind of pushing out there, advertising that they'd be able to do much longer. Like people with call centers are basically gone. India is extremely worried about this right now, that if Fable 5 and some of these other newer AI versions are out there, that they're all of a sudden capable of programming. Before it was kind of a mixed bag, but there's definitely problems on the horizon, and people are going to want solutions. If they can't find work, they'll embrace socialism.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what we've been driven to. And a lot of this really came out during the lockdowns, where the smaller businesses were deemed non-essential and the large businesses had a monopoly. You all remember
Yeah.
following the arrows in the grocery store. My wife and I would make it a point to go the opposite direction, and we never wore masks because all of that was an experiment to control us and to see what kind of compliance that they would get. But this continues marching forward, and what can we do about it? Well, we can continue to speak out. We can continue to be defiant and stand up for our freedom. But it's Marxism spreads like a cancer. How do we contain it in New York? How do we contain it in these other areas? Through elections,
Yeah.
maybe. But
Yeah.
you've seen that the Marxists can get in through elections. They can, whether they rig the elections or dupe enough people into voting for them. It's very problematic. It's very concerning.
Yeah. And that's, again, one of my big fears is watching how a lot of these states behave during COVID. Here where I'm at in Ohio, we didn't have any real restrictions after the initial 2 weeks to stop the spread. The grocery stores, I remember like there was one Walmart that had the arrows on the floor. Nobody was paying attention to them, and the other one did not. I'm kind of like equidistance between two of them where I live. Most places, they might have had masks and they brought out hand sanitizer in the entrance for people to use, but there was zero enforcement here. You didn't have to do anything. It was elective, but you could also tell who the mind numb robot sponges were walking around in their masks and everything else. And again, if I saw somebody like on an oxygen tank or whatever, where, they really had something to fear, that's fine. That's one thing. And like I've said before, I just straight up didn't comply. Even places that would try to enforce it, I would just walk right past them, because most of these people don't have the balls to actually do anything about it, to go in and stop you. If you just ignore them, they're going to get mad about it, but they're not going to do anything. But I guess to get back on track here, I do think that we start having major economic problems, which seem to be in the cards. Everybody's, there's going to be a correction for AI soon. And if we do start having massive unemployment from AI replacing a lot of these jobs, which I keep going back and forth on, but like I've stated on here more recently, I'm a lot more pessimistic on the overall effect that AI is going to have after talking to some of my former clients that own large manufacturing companies and seeing how they're looking at it, that they are bringing an army of robots to replace a lot of humans doing the jobs. And the white collar jobs, I mean, everybody's seeing these massive cuts to programming jobs across the country, call centers and other things. So that will continue to expand.
Yeah, it's scary. Like I have a friend who's a patent attorney, and he's looking at even jobs of attorneys and lawyers could be done by AI. They could be replaced. And so where do they go? And, he has a large family to support, and he's done all his grad school and law school and everything else. And suddenly, is he going to be left with a career that he's boxed out of by algorithms? It's really scary for people.
Yeah, and that brings up another interesting side of this, because yes, attorneys and a lot of people that are in more advisory roles, why not just have a very advanced search engine essentially doing their job that can go through, find you the context, and then handle the paperwork, document creation side of it, but also explain to its clients, why this is the path to go, or give them the legal answers they need. There's already been some experiments done with AI attorneys representing people through a person, but basically the machine did all the work, and they've actually had a pretty good track record on their cases. Now, I know initially it was kind of a joke, and there's been a few attorneys slapped down by judges for using AI to do their work, but these things have gotten more and more effective, and that's sort of why my opinion is on it changed. I used to be one of these people that thought, oh, there's no way by 2028 or 2030 we're going to be having these kind of problems, like people are predicting that this is jumping the gun, the technology's not there. But unfortunately, I was wrong about a lot of that, like especially regarding the robotics. Initially I thought, okay, arm robots at $30,000 to $40,000 that can move things from one conveyor belt to another, or perform very simple tasks. Yes, that's already a realistic danger that's been around for several years now, but up to this point, it hasn't been a major consideration because of the lack of robotics engineers and other people to put them in place and scale to the level the country needs. But that's changing rapidly, and a lot of these AI companies are developing tools to make it far easier to train the machines to replace the humans.
Yeah, and you might envision a courtroom with two robot attorneys arguing with one another, AI attorneys, but I think it's even more insidious than that, because that would just be theater. These AI don't even have to do that; they just exchange information. So you could literally get to a place where you just input some of these information, and it almost instantaneously spits out a verdict. So the trial that you should get, or the advocacy, just happens digitally. There are all kinds of implications. Nobody knows for sure, but you
Yeah.
have to start looking at where these things go, and it's things that when years ago were only part of science fiction, but even they couldn't have predicted some of the things that are happening. Think about the old Star Trek, where they essentially had a flip phone, and we all thought that was pretty cool. Wow, you can
Yeah.
talk into this little thing in your hand. You flip the cover on. Yeah, that's a dumb phone now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, a lot of that stuff that was science fiction is now becoming reality. Unfortunately, we don't have interstellar travel or a lot of that kind of stuff yet, but that's probably further down the line. But yeah, it is. You know, the Star Trek is actually a good way to put this. And I'm not a Star Trek person. I don't watched a lot of this, but I know the basics. And in their world, they have this high technology, but they also have replication technology, which we don't have, and that's basically the only thing keeping their planets, their world stable, in my opinion, because there is an abundance of everything. But that's not the reality we live in. So, I don't think it's something we'll be headed to anytime soon. Bernie Sanders is out there saying we're trying to push legislation right now to take 50% of the profits from the AI companies, and several of them have already pushed back, basically saying, "Well, that's not going to happen." And you can't target a specific business or industry with a law like that would just cripple their ability to make money. But also, if you're an investor in this company, whether that's thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, or billions of dollars. You invested in there to make a profit. Why would any of them give that up just to fund universal high income, as Elon Musk keeps calling it? Again, I just don't see that happening. The companies will leave the U.S. They will do other things to evade the taxes. And even if you do the math with the profits that most of them are not generating any profits right now. Most of them are, well, all of them are underwater. That they are a net drain on their parent companies, or they're already billions of dollars in debt, just basically just relying on investor capital to continue to come on to keep the lights on. I don't see that changing. There was an interview with Sam Altman where he talked about how initially they planned on being a free service. That doesn't work, but even now that they've switched into a pay model for the consumer side of what they're doing, and now they were always a pay model for the corporate side of what they did, or business side of what they did, but nobody wants to pay for their services, or a very, very small number. Instead, what they do is they go to other ones like Grok or whatever that can offer the same thing that ChatGPT had been offering before, but isn't charging the users a fee yet. And I don't see that changing, because the average person, if they use AI, they're asking it a few questions or having it do simple things, maybe generate an image here and there. And I don't see people being willing to pay for that, even though Google's now, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but Google's search engine's gone. All your search results now are run through their AI.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And one of the big problems is that technology far outpaces ethics. So instead of stopping and asking, should we do this, we're left with, what do we do now? And to further complicate this, we don't have one standard, which used to be based on biblical principles, Judeo-Christian ethics, you might say. Now, the matter of ethics is put to the masses, and it's everybody's opinion. Who has how many people have the opinion? We do polls to say, is this right or not? Well, right and wrong don't depend on how popular something is or how many people think that something is the case. Truth is truth. So
Yes.
we're on the horns of a dilemma here. And, for me, one of the reasons that I created Freedom Talk Magazine, it's the journal of truth and ethics, is to push people back to critical thinking, push people back to a sense of values and the ability to say, hey, there is black and white. Not everything's postmodern, not everything's relative. Your
Yeah.
opinion only matters if it squares with where the evidence leads. And that's a long journey back, but we're trying the best we can. So really the problem facing us, I think, ultimately is a spiritual and moral one. We have
Yeah.
the technology, the capability to do great things, but we can use those great advances for evil. And we're seeing some very evil people take control of those. And one of the fears is that some of the people who are into assisted suicide, eugenics, some of the horrors we saw in the 20th century are going to get a hold of some of these technologies, probably already have, and then
Yes.
use them to really, really be efficient at wiping out the people that they don't deem worthy of life.
Yeah, they keep trying to bring these Canadian style like MAID programs here. I mean, if you're up in the frozen north up there, just wait till you don't even get to talk to an actual doctor, a human, and a robot's deciding you're not worth saving, and they're scheduling your suicide right there on the phone or online with you because you've got back pain or something else.
Do an iris scan and it'll look you up and it'll say you're scheduled for termination on June 2nd, right?
Yeah.
This is no longer science fiction. This can happen.
Oh yeah, we've covered a few of these. I mean, not with robots yet in Canada, but like just how out of control that this MAID program's getting. That if somebody is above about 50 years old, that they are pushing people towards using the suicide machine because treating their you have a finite amount of resources with any kind of socialized medical system. The government can only pay so much into it. So cost-cutting measures, they're left with just denial of treatment, essentially.
Yeah. Besides, you're a carbon producer, and in Oregon, where I spent a lot of my life, my mom's side of the family's from there. Some people are trying to outlaw any hunting and fishing. So you're looked at almost as an alien on the planet, like you're just a destructive force. So the fewer of you there are, the better. What are those stones that people brought up? Some sort of stones that talked about reducing the population to like.
The Georgia Guidestones. Yeah, that got blown up a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, these ideologies are out there, and I worked because I trained under the once Department of Defense, now Department of War, in high level land reclamation, restoration. Worked in the environmental and conservation fields. And so I would run into Forest Service biologists and others who just treated you as if, we're invaders to the planet. And,
Yeah.
They can have these ideologies and we can call them kooky environmentalists, but then they get into power and it starts turning to how do we reduce humanity because we've invaded this continent and when we're destroying the environment, when in fact this nation is one of the most responsible on the planet. And I've been to several nations. I helped the Epic Times with a special about Sri Lanka, where I had spent a year teaching back in the 90s, and how these extreme environmentalists and New World Order people just completely outlawed synthetic fertilizers there right away, and it caused a famine. So we really need people who actually know how the land works, people who are trained, not ideologues, not the what's her name's the how dare you girl, coming in and
Greta Thunberg, the autistic potato. But yeah, I mean, our policy has to be pro-human no matter what. But yeah, the leftists have gotten away from that. They are anti-human in a lot of what they do, not just with environmentalism, but their policy in general, from pushing abortion, the trans nonsense. But, this is the reality we live in today. And I don't for a minute believe the planet's anywhere near overcrowded or overpopulated. Yeah, maybe there's some cities that people are just packed in too densely. And, I wouldn't disagree there. I do think, if you live in a vertical filing cabinet and you in your little closet, that's probably a problem. It's not how people are designed to live. But there's plenty of unoccupied, empty space out there. I mean, you go a mile outside any city in the U.S. at least, it's rural farmland. Even look at the if you look at a population map of Europe, it's the same way. Most countries the same way. People live on the coast. 80% of the world's population lives within 20 miles of a coastline. So, there's a lot of unoccupied, empty space out there. But unfortunately, humans have been driven into cities for a variety of reasons, and I don't think that's what we're designed for. But I guess we should probably get back on topic here because Antifa is all upset because they finally got some justice dispensed. And this is what happened when your trials in in Texas and not in Chicago. Florida, same thing. There was another one of these people that wanted to play speed bump and blocked ICE. I know they just got a ridiculously high jail sentence, according to the left, for interfering with ICE down there. But even though this was a federal case, your jury and your judge are in Texas, so they are not going to screw around. They are going to give you the maximum sentence. First batch of Just an Idea gets combined 450 years in federal prison for July 4th terror attack. Now, a lot of our mainstream dinosaur media, they are still pretending, oh, well, this is just a protest that got a little out of hand. Well, they were out there making noise and whatever. No, a police officer got shot in the neck. They were caught with explosives and fireworks. They planned to kill people. They tried to kill people. So, yeah, giving... I don't know if that's a he, she, or what it is, a they, them, 100 years in prison and giving the rest of them sentences between 30 and 70 years, I think is entirely appropriate. We have to send a message.
Figure it out.
Yeah, it's got plenty of time. They're out there crying. Well, even if they get good time and they're let out early, these people's lives are going to be gone. Some of them will never get out of prison. Good. Don't try to shoot cops. Don't try to violate the law. Don't attack people. Yeah. These are basic tenets our society has lived by since its inception. This is common sense. And because we don't take this seriously, because we keep giving them Antifa and other radicals ICE watch slaps on the wrist, that's why it continues to happen. Whereas there's actual consequences for their actions, then maybe some people will back down. Also, before I pass this over to you, Kelly, to refresh everybody's memory, these are the 8 people when we covered this story kind of as a joke a few weeks about Antifa having a emergency strip club to raise money for them. These are the people they were raising money for.
Oh, geez. At least 3 of them look like they're trans. And, these are the kind of people, when we had a coffee shop back in Tucson during the lockdowns, they would harass us. They would threaten us. The FBI would investigate us instead of these people, even though they were posting death threats. And I'd look at their profiles and they looked much like this. And yet people came to our shop for solace to say, hey, these COVID policies are killing our children. Later on, critical race theory and transgender theory. And I got arrested for sitting in an office meeting for speaking. I've been arrested twice now for speaking, but somehow, you sitting and speaking your mind and standing up to tyranny is quote unquote criminal, and people
violence
criminal actions is speech. We're not buying it. And honestly, I know we're going to get into this later, but DOJ has done far too little and too late to help the people who held the line, who stood up and who spoke out against this, who are still laboring under false convictions, continued harassment, continued persecution, and the DOJ does nothing about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're exactly right. We'll get more into that here in just a minute. But yeah, you kind of pointed out these people all look like they're mentally distressed. They look like the rogues gallery from a Batman movie. They look like if Commissioner Gordon doesn't hand over the Batman by midnight, they're going to burn down the city. But that's normal. It's mental illness on the left. And if we have time, we'll get to that story too, because that's something else that's accelerating, is they are literally and figuratively getting more and more crazy. They're on more and more antipsychotics. There's a higher incidence of people among the left that are being treated for mental illness. And I think it's the ideology. Like, this doesn't work. They have deluded themselves with a lot of what they believe, that these things are antithetical to human nature or have never worked, since the beginning of recorded history. A lot of the policy that they want, they are nuts. But, we have a media that pretends they have valid viewpoints on a lot of these things, and they do not. We've got to stop treating it that way. We have to get some of these people the care they actually need. I mean, making mental institutions great again, some people think that sounds cruel, but we've got to do something with these people. We've got to get them off the streets. This problem is going to continue to grow unless we address it.
And I did some work for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I've done suicide prevention work. My own mother committed suicide when I was 10. So I do know that mental illness can be a very real thing. Your body, your brain, they can have deficiencies, but there are good treatments available. The problem is the left pushes this as an identity and a crutch and an excuse for behavior. And I've always said, hey, if somebody has a mental illness or their body chemistry's off, their brain chemistry's off, that's not really their fault. When it becomes their fault is when they refuse to get treated, they refuse to address the problem. They refuse to, medication is one thing that works, exercise, a spiritual life. There are a whole lot of things that can help. But the problem is then that becomes an identity and your behavior gets justified. I mean, look at the case of the man who murdered, what's the Ukrainian gal's name?
Irina Zarutska.
Yeah. He may well be mentally ill and not fully cognizant of what he's doing, but you have to look at the judges and say, why is he not mandated and ordered to be in an institution to get cleaned up so that he is a functional member of society? If he's that ill or that messed up, he shouldn't be out on the streets.
No, exactly. And again, in his case, I can't remember if he had been previously convicted of 14 or 18 crimes, but there's already a track record there. Even his own family said he should be off the street, his sister and mother, which is scary. Like, they knew what they were dealing with. And, I think, the mental illness defense is supposed to be that, somebody doesn't understand the difference in right and wrong. It's supposed to be extreme cases here and there. And there are some of them. There are some like that. Like, I remember a murder that happened while I was in Florida where it was very clear the person that committed it, unfortunately, was not mentally stable, didn't understand what was going on. And things like that do happen, and some things are going to slip through the cracks, or maybe this person was fine I don't remember the specific details now, but maybe the person was fine while they were still under the care of a family member. But if I remember correctly, they'd recently been put in like an apartment on their own and being checked in on and all that, and that's when this happened. And it was a case where it's a big person. They didn't really understand their own strength, I don't think, but they also clearly didn't understand what they had done was didn't understand the gravity of what they'd done, that this person was never coming back. But regardless, that shouldn't be the norm. That shouldn't be the normal defense. We have to do something about this. And when you have people like this that think they're radicals, that they're the ones that are going to save the country, they're revolutionaries, sorry, not radicals. They're obviously radicals. That their violence is justified, and with the media and the left is continuing to prop that up, pretend somehow, we're in the middle of a dictatorship. That feeds into this mental illness. But, I guess to expand this too, revealed Minnesota state employee under Tim Walz among 15 Antifa militants charged in anti-ICE conspiracy. Now, the DOJ is saying that they're going to expand this. There's going to be more arrests. There's going to be more prosecutions. But I'm kind of at the I'll believe it when I see it, because this is the first batch where they've actually gotten real sentences. As we pointed out before, our DOJ in California and other places cut deals with a lot of these violent radicals, from Tesla terrorists to the original ICE protests in LA. They dropped or reduced charges for people. They didn't go after a lot of these NGOs that were responsible, even though they talked tough. They didn't actually pursue the cases. And in this case, you have one person that has a direct connection to Tim Walz's office among these 15. But then the other side of the coin there is that you just had a federal judge block the DOJ's effort just to investigate Tim Walz and Jacob Frey over these same anti-ICE protests. I we can't function as a country if you have judges popping up again. I think exceeding their jurisdiction anyway, and blocking investigations into criminal activity. I mean, I don't know what possible excuse you can have for that. Especially again, it's not like they're not coming at this without facts or information. I mean, it's right in front of us, right there. There's obviously a connection to Tim Walz.
Yeah, judges are supposed to have one job, and that is to apply circumstances and see what the Constitution has to say about it. Federal
call balls and strikes.
But we have things like Michael Castellero, who was given 10 years for lawfare business BS, as far as I can tell. But the judge went ahead and added a year because he spoke about it on social media when he wasn't even, didn't have a gag order or anything. So, these judges have way too much power, way too much leeway. Penalizing someone for exercising their free speech, that's not only not part of the Constitution that falls within a judge's purview, it's quite unconstitutional.
Yeah,
so these judges
evil.
Are rogue, they're out of control, and it's the DOJ refuses to address the root of the problem or bring any justice. Michael's been waiting for a pardon for so long and just desperate and reaching out to everyone he can. I've texted people in DOJ and said, when are you going to pardon him? Oh, we're working on it. Well, I also got information recently that certain people in the White House, I'm not saying it's Trump, but certain people in the White House have a whole lot of these pardons sitting on their desk, and they're looking at the polls to see whether or not they're going to pull the trigger on the pardons. Can we just have a government that does the right thing instead of being self-interested all the time? Michael's family is already struggling greatly, but if he goes to prison, they're going to be destitute. I mean, can for Pete's sake, can we get a government that actually does the right thing?
Nope. Not anytime soon, but you're exactly right. That's the biggest part of the problem right now, and why the polls are what they are, is we're not getting the right thing, the right actions out of a lot of this. We're not getting a lot of what we voted for, as we keep saying. We voted for justice, for righteous retribution on our political enemies that weaponized government, and we're just not seeing it. We're not seeing justice for a lot of people. There's still the Epstein ghost out there that they just don't want to talk about now, just completely ignore. That's obviously a big part of the problem.
Yeah,
and if you don't deal
said in a press conference, we're moving away from that. It's like, no, we're not going to move away from that. You don't get to tell us, just be quiet, shut up, and we're moving on, because no, we're not going to be quiet. And we know that James O'Keefe did a sting recently where a DOJ employee revealed that they're protecting Republican Epstein violators now. You don't get to tell us we're moving on. And this is the problem. The government forgets that they work for us. If we break the law or we step outside the societal norms and harm someone, the government can come in. But other than that, piss off. The government works for us. We are a government of, for, and by the people. So don't massage the narrative. Don't tell us what to do when we're exercising our natural rights, like free speech. We're going to talk about it. Don't tell us you're moving on, because if we want to talk about it, you're damn sure going to listen and answer our questions.
Well, yeah. A big part of what we voted for was to end all this behind closed door, hidden whatever. We voted for turning government inside out, bringing all the dirt out, and then letting the American people decide what to do about it. We know there's huge levels of corruption. We know there's numerous things being hidden from the American people that shouldn't be. Again, like I said before, I don't want the secret sauce for nuclear warheads or stuff that is legitimately damaging to our defense. Real military secrets and like that don't need to come out. But the rest of these things, people have a right to know, whether it's the UFO, UAP program, or what really happened with the Kennedy assassination, or Operation Mockingbird, or other things that might make intelligence agencies look bad. No, this is our country. We have a right to know. The people are supposed to hold the power here. Until we get back into that mindset, we're going to continue to have these problems. But the problem is, anybody that does anything about it is immediately a target of the deep state and this uniparty. Our next story here, Bill Pulte. The deep state fears acting DNI Bill Pulte. They targeted him months ago. So Bill Pulte, to refresh everybody's memory, he is the guy that brought the information forward to the DOJ regarding Letitia James, Big Tish. James Comey, and Eric Swalwell's mortgage fraud. And, the media scoffs and laughs at, this is just little crimes, things that happen, blah, 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 blah. No, these are ongoing. These are people that know better, that are doing this with intent to enrich themselves and to defraud the government. Every one of them should be prosecuted, just like you and I would be, if we were taking these same actions for financial benefit. This isn't, again, none of these are a mistake. These aren't like a signature or a document that wasn't submitted correctly or something like that. These are willful intent crimes that they should be prosecuted. All these crimes should be prosecuted. I much prefer we were going after the more serious crimes. But again, Pulte was using the tools available to him at his job then, moves forward this, gives the information to Ed Martin, and then him and Ed Martin are targeted rather than the criminals. It's like completely upside down and backwards.
And I was there, and I have some recordings around this, and it's all related to a lot that's going on at DOJ, including the weaponization against Americans, which has been effectively, the weaponization working group was killed, and it happened when Ed Martin was quietly put out of that position, partly because he was actually getting things done for victims of weaponization, and partly because he did go after Adam Schiff. And you got to ask the question, who's protecting Adam Schiff? Who got rid of Ed Martin? I think the answer is pretty clear.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. You sent me this tweet from Christina Bish, Bish for Congress. I want to see what Adam Schiff put on his mortgage applications. It's called a 1003, the Uniform Residential Loan Application. That is where borrowers list income, assets, liabilities, occupancy, and the intended use of the property. So again, we've got a pretty good idea what are on these forms that, again, he filled out himself. They implicate him, or if he's going to say, someone else did this on my behalf. Well, that excuse doesn't hold up in court for the rest of us. So it shouldn't hold up for Schiff either. If you break the law, you need to pay a penalty for that. And if that penalty in this case is a few years in jail, as well, what's been suggested, that it's multiple crimes related to these properties, not to mention, again, he should have been representing California during most of this time anyway, because he no longer owned property back there. But that's a whole nother story. But again, why is it we keep having these politically connected or elected people, the powerful, protected instead of having justice administered like you and I would have?
I have so many answers to that. Go to @RealFreedomTalk on X and look at some of my posts, because I've done the homework on this. I've done the research. I've for quite some time I've been legally recording meetings. Mainly it was for notes so I could go back and look at the transcript. But I did have some things come up where I felt I needed to release that to the public, because, for instance, Todd Blanche's senior attorney, Vance Day, referring to parents once again, saying we don't negotiate with terrorists, trying to say that the targeting of parents was a state issue. There's no federal remedy. And then turning around later and holding this mock, not open house, but roundtable, where they disinvited the actual targeted parents, except for one or two hand-picked, curated people to testify. And this was the same meeting on January 23rd, where I found out, apparently, according to Emerald Robinson, before President Trump even knew, that Ed Martin had been quietly boxed out, off the weaponization working group. I have evidence that sources that tell me they tried to get rid of him, but he refused to go. So they kicked him down into the janitor's closet and put him over some pardons. But none of this, nobody wants to answer questions about this. I released the recordings, and Blanche and the DOJ literally sent agents out to squash the story, even flying someone down to talk to a prominent show host to get her to cancel that, and trying to bribe certain people with inclusion into Arctic frost protections in order to silence the story. And here's the thing: I'm small. I don't have a huge audience, but they've done. I'm also the acknowledged leader of founder of Parents Demanding Justice Alliance, the only targeted parent who's led that. I'm the acknowledged leader of this movement. And they deliberately excluded me from that June 11th roundtable, which doesn't make sense. They claim that it's because I recorded them and so-called couldn't be trusted. Well, you know what? uh, accountability is a great thing, and it's a bitch when it's used against you. Your own tactics used against you. We were surveilled and monitored and harassed for years. I do an innocent recording and then release it to the public, and suddenly I'm the bad guy. But even that's a lie, because in that January 23rd meeting with Vance Day, he told me that they didn't want people like me who weren't quote unquote squeaky clean to testify. So what he was saying is, yeah, I guess we're going to have this hearing because you're pushing for it, but we don't want the people who are really damaged to testify, because we want the agency to look as good as possible. So you trot somebody up there, like the main parent who actually had won in court, was exonerated, was pardoned by Governor Youngkin. You trot them up there and say, "Look, isn't this great what we've done?" Wow. Meanwhile, the rest of us have had our cases dropped. We've been continue to be persecuted and demonized by the DOJ. So this is the way things are working. And honestly, folks, you got to start paying attention. Stop watching the propaganda, the Benny Johnsons, all of this. They're not going to tell you the truth. What's happening is things like what Christine Bish are doing, Joe Hoft, Grant Stinchfield, me, Michael. We all know what's going on, and we're giving facts instead of propaganda. We're in the mix. We're on the front lines, and it's time people woke up to what's actually going on. Just because Trump's in office doesn't mean everything is reformed and cleaned up. There's still a lot of bad people in place,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are very deceptive. They're going to make you think they're on your side, just like Bill Barr did.
Yeah.
Just like Rod Rosenstein did.
Yeah. Well, there were people warning about both of them beforehand, but nobody listened. This is the thing. Like, we wouldn't be at all concerned about the midterms if we would just do the things that we voted for. If the administration would just, if we were actually getting justice, if things were actually happening at the DOJ. But right now, there's a lot of people that are frustrated because of this, because again, these are the main things that people voted for. It was the administration of justice and ending the border crisis, mass deportations. Now, I will give them this. They are trying with deportations, despite all the whack-a-mole judges that keep popping up that have to be smacked down constantly, trying to interfere with that. Again, you can say, well, yeah, I wish they'd do more, blah, 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 and criticize them, but they are at least trying there. There is a legitimate effort. I wish they were doing mass deportations already, but...
Tom Homan lately,
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that's the same thing. They think he's too rough and gruff and all that, and he's become a target of the left, despite being Obama's immigration czar as well. But again, this part of the issue with our media just being detached from reality and being a mouthpiece for the left. All right, I want to pull a few more things here before we run out of time here. Steamy pile of dog shit. Crazed Tillis trashes Pulte for firing deep state intel officials. So Pulte assumed Tulsi Gabbard's previous role temporarily. There is zero possibility the Senate's actually going to approve him. I'll just go ahead and say that now. All these rhinos there will block his effort. But he can have, I think it's 180 days or 100 and some odd, maybe it's 120 days. And in that, it's 120 days in that position to clean house. So you know what? I think he ought to fire every person on every list that he has access to while he is there serving temporarily as the DNI. And that way, at least the problem is partially resolved. We just got to make sure we don't put anybody in there afterwards that'll rehire any of these people. All these embedded deep state officials have to go, from the CIA, the DNI, the FBI, everywhere. This needs to be a higher priority, because if we leave these deep state operatives in place, then John Brennan, still has his legion of loyalists embedded in our government, and the problem is never solved. We have to actually take these steps and do the hard things. I'm sure there'll be a judge that pops up to say he has to give their jobs back. It'll go up to the Supreme Court, and once again, they'll say, nope, this is under the purview of the executive branch. They're allowed to fire them. But, we're going to have to do the hard things if we actually want to save the country.
This government is irretrievably broken. What we really need to do is 250 years into the Republic is we need to scrap the whole thing and build it from the ground up, from the foundation. We need a new form of government. We can't work with this one. And, I've spent years trying to accomplish something simple, and that is to honor and restore the parents who stood up for our kids. And I've gone to so many members of Congress and the Senate, and they'll stand with you for a little while, and then they'll sell you out when they don't think the optics are good. There are some notable exceptions, but even these people who weren't politicians who ran for office to make a difference, they're frustrated They talk to me and they say, Kelly, and people running for office now, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do anything, but I'm going to run, I'm going to try, and I'm going to go through this crucible of being slandered so I can try to do something. I mean, it's absolutely a joke. And Washington, D.C., I hate to say this, but Washington, D.C. is their little kingdom. It's not ours. And that's why we wanted perp walks and arrests, and instead we're getting a dining room, a repainted reflecting pool, and all of these things. And, not that those things shouldn't be done, but Todd Blanche, for example, hasn't done a damn thing for the parents or the J6ers. But as soon as Trump got another assassination attempt, he was all over. We got to finish the dining room. We got to finish the dining room. The media is all over the reflecting pool.
Yeah.
What about the people? The government isn't the buildings and the reflecting pond and the dining rooms and the pomp and the golden age. The government is the people. I keep thinking about, Asgard isn't a place, it's a people, from the Avengers movie. The people are getting a raw deal. We're not getting what we voted for. We've got asshats. Can I say that on there?
Yeah.
Like this senator and others who are just
circling the wagons to protect the cancer.
Self-interested. Yeah. So, and unfortunately, they have control. We give them respect. It's time they started listening to us, because what Donald Trump promised on his first inauguration was to return the power to the people. He was hungry. He told Clinton, you need to be arrested. Where is that Donald Trump? We've got a Donald Trump now who's doing MMA events on the White House lawn and embroiled in Iran. And a lot of us are saying, yeah, we love the guy. We're thankful for what he did. But where is this part about returning power to the people? Because not only do we not have any more power than we had, we're not even getting restitution for the damage done to us.
I just thought of something. Early in Trump's second term, one of the things they floated was this idea of not breaking up necessarily, but moving some of these government agencies out of D.C. into other parts of the country. And that's something I really do think needs to happen. I can understand.
Isn't that something Kash Patel said he'd do with the FBI? Did that ever happen?
I don't know if that. I am pretty sure we don't have the headquarters turned into the Museum of the Deep State yet, but I'll have to go back and check, because that's what he said. He was going to shut the building down, turn it into a Museum of the Deep State. But I think just moving these different departments outside of DC, putting them all over the country. This will also help, again, financially, different areas that they go to, but also make it a little harder for the swamp to exist. If everybody's not door to door, they're not all buddies living next door to each other. It's a lot harder to create these little back deals and everything else that go on that we're all just so disgusted by. It would also make sense logistically with a lot of these agencies to move the USDA out closer to where they're actually inspecting cattle, make their headquarters out there, so they can hire people from the area that understand the industry more than bureaucrats in DC will. Same with other agencies. Yeah, maybe the courts and DOJ and things like that have to stay in DC just because for logistics. Again, that makes sense. But otherwise, these can be sent all over the country. A lot of them, there's no reason. And I think a lot of them, they need to go places that aren't going to be a friendly territory. Because again, we should be skeptical of these people at the very least. But something's got to change. And again, you had this other tweet out here too, which I want to bring up real fast. Where essentially, part of what you're saying is, it's great the FBI is doing their job, but that's, again, not what we voted for. You could jump into this here real quick.
Yeah. So, can you put the post back up? Because I want to.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
So, yeah, I have Kash Patel's phone number. I've talked to him. He knows who I am. I know his girlfriend a little bit, his girlfriend's family. I've talked with them. I've always been really supportive, and I look at this from the sense that, yeah, you were among us. You had a show, you had a podcast. I'm good friends with Jan Jekielek, who did a show with Kash. So we're kind of all in that circle. And here's what I think is happening. I think that these people talked big when they had podcasts. They had good intentions, perhaps. They wrote books. They sold books. But once they got into office, it's a whole different story. And, so I said, you're relentlessly pursuing financial fraud, yet you can't seem to find the people who committed fraud on the lives of countless Americans. So I honestly think, Harmeet Dillon, Kash Patel, all the others, they don't really know what to do to help the victims of weaponization, because they're up against a massive machine. And I think they've been threatened. Everything's been thrown at them to get them to stop going against the deep state. How they've responded to that, I guess, is up to them. But one thing they haven't done, like after they held this phony roundtable on June 11th, Cash announced, well, we fired all the FBI agents who participated in this. Well, how do you know? You haven't even talked to us. You don't know the FBI agent that came into my coffee shop. And what are their names? And how do we know? And why haven't some of them been arrested because they did illegal things? The DOJ abused its power to destroy the livelihoods of ordinary citizens, and the institution continues to protect itself. I've said so. You know, the facts are there, and I keep getting silenced for pointing out what's obvious. And I have recordings in their own words in context, and they just want to silence that. And it's like there comes a point where Kash Patel, Harmeet Dillon, all of you, y'all need to get up and start answering questions and stop excluding the people who are asking them, like me.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, the problem is not going to fix itself if you're not going to do the hard things at the DOJ and fire. You know, I keep hearing different numbers. 70 to 90% of the attorneys there apparently are just deep state operatives. They're there for the wrong reasons. I know it's difficult to get people to take the jobs and move to DC, but I would rather have a partially functioning DOJ that was free of the corruption and all these embedded deep state operatives were out of than to continue having that same monster sabotaging us. Same with the FBI.
From Judicial Watch now is saying, look, we need somebody besides the DOJ and the FBI to investigate them. So he and Todd Blanche have been having words back and forth. Look, I've been saying the truth here, and what I've gotten for it is just criticism, pressure. I've gotten nasty grams from people in that Kash Patel circle. If you dare critique them, suddenly you are you're chipping away at their carefully crafted image, and you're a malcontent, or you're a panican, or you're a black pillar. No, actually, what I'm doing is I came in supporting you. I came in hoping that these people, including my family, who were horribly abused by the past administration, would get some help. And we're not seeing it. So I'm showing you in your own words what you're doing and what you're not doing, and you want to hide it. This does not engender trust. What this does is make us want to push harder. So just fess up, Kash. Fess up, Harmeet. Say, look, we're dealing with something nobody's ever had to deal with before, a level of weaponization that we've never seen. Can you help us? Will you bring people in? Ed Martin did that, and I think that's why he was let go, because he was the first one to admit that the targeting of parents was federal weaponization. Todd Blanche and his goons tried to push it back to the states. Look, we're not going away, all right? Just be honest and say, look, we've been given a huge task. We're not sure exactly how to do it, but let's roll up our sleeves together and get it done. Or you can just go, because Harmeet praised Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi got fired. Harmeet's praising Todd Blanche now. Todd Blanche hasn't done a damn thing except talk, and we're told, oh, justice is coming. Just be patient. It's put back on us like, oh, if you would just be patient. You know?
Well, I mean, again, if we were actually getting results on at least some of these things, I would say same thing. You know, if the things were moving along not as quickly as we'd like, but some of these things were happening, it'd be a different game. But it just isn't happening. And, you know, Tom Fenton here is, again, a great tweet. The FBI can't and DOJ can't investigate themselves. That doesn't work. They're obviously compromised, but Fenton's, again, been a great warrior out there for all of us. And he's become a target now because he's also been out there demanding the rest of the Epstein files are released. Again, them living up to the law that Trump signed, this Epstein Transparency Act. And then, you know, people are getting mad when we say, talk about this stuff, like, oh, they just want it to go away. I'm not sure who they're protecting. I don't really care. But at the end of the day, everybody deserves justice. This needs to actually come out. We need actual arrests. If you're not going to do anything about the super government, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, then we've gained nothing, because things are just going to go back to business as usual once Trump's gone, or maybe J.D. Vance or whoever.
I've got a message for Todd Blanche. You know, excluding the people who criticize you, excluding the people who reveal legal recordings of things that your own staff said, that's not going to go well for you. You can try to manage that, but you can't keep that in the box, and we're not going to go away, and we're not going to be quiet. Why don't you just be honest, own it, apologize, and say, now let's work together with everybody, not a few curated people, not a couple of celebrity sellouts that'll stand up there and speak for people who don't want them to speak for them. You know, the targeted parents didn't get to speak. One parent that you curated, that you hand selected, that you thought was squeaky clean, does not represent us. Yeah, I was arrested. Yeah, I was sentenced to jail. So were other parents. Yeah, there are some of us who have warrants out for arrest. In one case, because a school mom wouldn't write an apology to the principal who had her thrown into jail.
Yeah.
We don't want goddamn squeaky clean people. We want the people who took the hardest hits. And you're keeping that testimony from the American people. You ought to be fired. And you ought to be
Yeah, all of
ashamed
them.
that someone on your staff again called us terrorists and you said we don't negotiate with terrorists. You know what? I don't have words strong enough. You ought to be out of your job. You ought to be in the unemployment line. These people deserve honor, and you've given them nothing but shame and continued persecution and silencing. It's a shame to our government, and it's about time President Trump did something about that.
Yeah. Again, nothing's going to change. They don't take the first steps and do the hard things. I don't care if you're friends with these people and you go to the same cocktail parties. They're monsters. They all got to go. Firing really isn't enough. They need prosecuted, a lot of them.
Yeah, we've given you a chance. You know, we're coming up to the midterms. James O'Keefe and I have talked about it in person, and he's gotten secret recordings. You know,
Yep.
I did the same thing he did, and the recording he got was that the strategy of the deep state is to run out the clock on Donald Trump, so they can say all day long, "Oh, just be patient. Justice is coming. Justice is coming." Bullshit. Nothing has happened, except that we've been treated the same way we were treated under the Biden administration, and that's shameful.
Yep. Well, any words of wisdom you want to leave the audience with here before we wrap things up, Kelly?
Don't get Kelly mad.
Yeah.
Don't get a father mad. You know, they came after my family, and then I saw them coming after other people's family. And yeah, I'm angry, but I'm also calculated because you know what you did to people was wrong, and justice is coming, and it's coming on you. Get it this life or the next. I'm not a threatening man. I've never been violent. I never will be violent. I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to love my enemies. But what you're doing is wrong, and more people know it, and eventually it's going to catch up with you. That's all I have to say.
Well said. And before we go, just want to remind everybody again, The Architecture of Jihad, that is out on audiobook. Go pick up a copy, help support Annie, all the great work she does, and help get educated more on this enemy that America and Europe are facing right now. Again, you're seeing the results of that. Things are finally the people are finally starting to move in Europe, it looks like. Things could finally change there. But to our audience, again, thank you for joining us today. Again, please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to grow so we can bring more people the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. I'll be back tomorrow, actually with Annie, with even more. Thanks again.